to the Friday, June 4th edition of the Clemson Dubcast 2021. Man, I feel kind of guilty right now because I actually have time to interview and record, cut a podcast, whereas our man Paul Strelo is killing it over at Dabo Sweeney's Clemson camp. There's tons and tons of information that only he can provide. He is the best in the business at covering Clemson recruiting. So if you already aren't at TigerIllustrated.com, go there right now because there's a wealth of information and insight that you can't get anywhere else. My good friends Blake Smith and Brooke Archenhold have been part of the podcast since the beginning, way back in August of 2018. They have an accomplished team of personal injury attorneys at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold based in Greenville. They are Clemson people, and their skillful attorneys have decades of experience in complicated litigation matters, taking a special interest in medical malpractice, nursing home abuse and neglect, car accident cases that have left the individuals involved in serious trouble. For a free consultation at Parham, Smith, and Archenhold, call 864-990-4581 or online at parhamlaw.com. That's PARHAM law.com. Celero Communications, formerly known as Tandem Payment, is a full-service integrated electronic payments provider powered by leading-edge technology. Celero provides a wide array of merchant solutions, simplified payments. They make onboarding, taking payments, maintaining risk management and compliance, and getting support quick and easy. At Celero, they're all about helping you achieve sustainable growth as a business. Taking payments isn't the only thing your business needs. With Celero's solutions, you can manage inventory, sell products and services via social media, schedule staff, track sales, get reports, and much, much more. Find out more about Celero at celerocommerce.com. That's CELERO commerce.com. When you're ready for a complete renovation in your home or business, open the door to more with Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Their local experienced team will totally transform any room space, from beautiful floor coverings to construction to finished details. Harris handles every step of your renovation process, whether it's a kitchen or living room or an industrial or educational setting, like some of the positively stunning work they've done at Clemson University. Go to discoverharris.com and experience a total renovation transformation from Harris Home and Harris Commercial. Okay, to our interview, Brett Jensen, who formerly on the Clemson beat used to antagonize Tommy Bowden and others. I say that semi-jokingly. Now he's antagonizing North Carolina's governor. More on that in this interview. Always fun stuff with Brett. Here we go. All right, joined by my friend Brett Jensen. Brett, what are you stirring up now, man?
Larry, you know I don't do stuff like that. What are you talking about, buddy?
I'm sorry. Somebody sent me, I guess it was Philip Sykes. You remember him from Clemson, sports information guy?
Yep.
He sent late last night. He sent me the little video exchange between you and North Carolina's governor, and I'm like, man, that is classic Brett in a good way, taking somebody to task for, that's particularly an elected official, to task for not being, I guess, open to scrutiny. Can you? I know you and I talked about this several months ago. You shared with me that you were having problems basically being ignored at press conferences, not being called on and such. Can you give maybe a Cliff's Notes on the story here? Like the background?
Yeah. And, it's a little convoluted, but yeah, we'll make it as simple as possible. So I work for WBT radio here in Charlotte. It's one of the oldest radio stations in the entire country. As a matter of fact, we celebrate our 100th anniversary next year. And just to take listeners behind the scenes a little bit, if you ever hear of a radio station with only 3 letters, WBT, KFI out Los Angeles, WGN in Chicago, those are the oldest ones. Those are the original radio stations in America. And so because we're one of the originals, we have the biggest radio signals in the country. That's why you can be in Charlotte, North Carolina, or in Clemson, South Carolina, and still hear WGN Chicago at night on AM radio. And we're the same way. And so we are the biggest news radio station between Washington, D.C. and Atlanta. And we are the second biggest news station in the entire South behind WSB in Atlanta. And so we've been the number one radio station of any type in Charlotte for all of 2020. And I'm the lead reporter. And when the pandemic started, Governor Cooper shut, North Carolina down, just like most governors did, and shut North Carolina down in March of 2020. And he started doing all his press conferences virtually, meaning we had to call in, and then we were called upon as reporters, and this was all live on TV, and we were called upon. They would say, okay, up next, Larry Williams from Tiger Illustrated. What's your question? And then you would ask your question, and it would be broadcast across all the TV stations that were carrying it. I got to ask a question in March 24th, 2020, and it was a benign question. It was a really simple question about testing time, because if you remember the early days of COVID, if you wanted to get tested, sometimes it was taking 10, 14 days to get your results. And by that time, and by the time you got your results, you may have already finished all your symptoms with COVID.
Yeah.
So you may have already survived it and passed on or to the next level. And so it was just turnaround testing time. It was a benign question. And that was literally the last time. And I kept calling in and calling in and calling in. And then finally, one point, I'm like, okay, am I doing something wrong here? So at one point over this last summer, I called in 30 minutes ahead of time. 30 minutes ahead of time when you're supposed to. And a recording said, you were the first person in this conference call. And I still didn't get called on. So then I knew they were cherry picking.
Yeah.
That's when I knew they were cherry picking who they would pick. So they went on, and I, never called on me. And so I would reach out to his staff, and his staff goes, I don't know what's going on. And, a lot of people are trying to get in. And I'm like, well, that doesn't make sense, because he's literally calling on, or you people are literally picking the same people every single press conference. So something's not right here. Why has some person asked 50 questions at this point, and I've asked one? Like, what are we doing? It also did not help the fact that our station, which is a news talk station, former governor of North Carolina, Pat McCrory, had a daily show on our station. And Pat McCrory lost by less than 1% to Roy Cooper in the 2016 election. And these two men just do not like each other. So
Cooper, Democrat, McCrory, Republican?
Yes, correct.
Okay.
Correct. And so I don't know if that played any part into it. And they just said, you know what, Pat McCrory's on that station, and we're just not going to talk to that station. And I've always said, Pat McCrory or any of the talk show hosts, they never get in the news side of things. They're just talk show hosts. All they do is talk for a living, and they don't tell me or ask me about my reporting. I inform them, hey, I have something, I think this would be good, and then that's when it's broadcast on their shows or whatever. So anyway, we were completely independent and autonomous of each other.
You're straight news,
I'm just straight news. Yeah. All I do is politics and news. That's all I do. I mean, it could be, a shooting, it could be a court trial, it could be a good story, it could be a bad story, but I'm just straight news. That's all I do.
And even, but Brett, even if you were, it'd be one thing if McCrory were there at the press conference,
Right.
But even if you were an opinion guy, they still need to answer your question. You still need to have it, I would argue.
I agree. And so on Wednesday, for the first time in 440 days, Governor Cooper held his first in-person press conference in Raleigh. And that's about a 2.5-hour drive from Charlotte. I was tied up working on another project, so I couldn't do it. And then Wednesday night, about 6 o'clock, I get an email because they send out one thing that listeners may not know is that every day the governor's administration has to send out the governor's itinerary for the following day. And they send it out to all the media outlets. It was a public information, and they just send it out. Here's what the itinerary is tomorrow. And then I see, lo and behold, he's going to be in Charlotte, North Carolina at 12:45 p.m. at a vaccination clinic to promote how the state is giving away $25 gift cards if you get your vaccine, or if you drive someone there to get their vaccine, the driver gets a $25 gift card.
Dang.
So I know I need to change businesses and go into Uber, but so he showed up yesterday, And that's when, after like the CEO of this vaccination clinic was there, the mayor was there, county commissioners were there. There were, 20 media members there from all across the state. They were there. And after they did their little opening remarks and handshaking and everything else, and then some reporters asked questions. I didn't want to be the first, but I also wanted to make sure I was going to get my question in. So after 3 questions is when I asked him my question. Hey, Larry, if you want to stop, I can send you the audio, or you can use
I'm gonna splice it into the podcast.
Okay, yeah. And so I mean, this would be like a really good spot to put in the audio. So if you want to put that in, that'd be perfect.
Brett Jensen with WBT. I'm curious if you could explain, maybe in great detail, why, despite being the largest news station between D.C. and Atlanta, despite the Charlotte Observer and the Raleigh News Observer writing massive articles about it, thousands of mentions on Twitter, and yet we have yet to be called on in your news conference since last March, as a matter of fact. But yet some reporters have asked over 100 questions. So I'm just curious if you could explain in great detail why your staff was instructed to not call on us specifically and a couple of other media outlets.
First, I'm not aware of that. Second, I had an in-person news conference yesterday. You were welcome to come then, and you're welcome to come in the future.
What about the previous 14 months?
I'm not aware of.
So even though your staff was asked about it, they did not tell you about this? Because many media members asked your staff about it.
Like I said, you're invited to come, and you're here now. So ask away.
So, well, my question is, what happened in the last previous 14 months?
I don't know.
We're short on time. Do we have any other questions?
Governor, talk to your staff. We don't get to the 70.
And so that's the question. There you heard the exchange. It lasted 1 minute and 3 seconds.
So, all right. The thing that sort of got me was he was missing the point with his answer saying, you're free to be here. Well, that's not the question. You were free to be on the Zoom press conferences too. You just weren't free to ask a question.
That's exactly right. And what bothered me, and it has nothing to do that we're like, the size of us, because I would probably, honestly, and I think, Larry, you know me well enough, I'd probably have even more chip on my shoulder if I worked at a very small website going, well, wait a minute, why are we being excluded, but you're taking all the questions from all the big boys? Like, are our listeners or readers not important? And I would probably have even more of a chip on my shoulder. And so I just thought, like, you're a politician, and no one forced you to run for office. And so I carried over the mentality from sports, and it was that, look, you're a football coach making $6 million a year. You're not talking about life and death situations. This isn't the CIA. It's not state secrets. You can answer a question. And so I sort of carried that mentality into politicians, even more so when I started doing news 2.5 years ago, because it's like, wait a minute, no one forced you to be mayor, governor. You wanted to do this on your own. You're the one who chose to represent the people. Therefore, I think you can answer a question for the people. And when he excluded us, he excluded, the largest news station in North or South Carolina. And that just did not sit well with me. And as a matter of fact, early last fall, the Charlotte Observer and the Raleigh News and Observer wrote very big, extensive articles on how I'm being shut out. And so when Governor Cooper says, I'm unaware of that, I don't know what you're talking about. First of all, so you're telling me a major story in the 2 biggest newspapers in the state you were oblivious to, front page stories, mind you. And then the other thing is many media, and you can maybe hear me say in the audio clip, many media outlets have contacted your staff and asked your staff about this. So you're telling me your staff just did this on their own and never once told you that the media is contacting them? So that tells me 2 things. And if you can think of another explanation, I'd love to hear it, because I've asked a lot of people. I can only think of 2 possible explanations. Either Governor Cooper is just point blank lying to me in his answer, saying he doesn't know, he hadn't heard about it, or B, his staff is doing some sort of insurrection and doing things behind his back and not telling him.
Yeah, I mean,
I can't think of any other possible explanations.
I mean, it sounds like he's throwing his staff under the bus by his answer, saying I wasn't aware, but a realist would conclude that he was aware, and he was just
right. There's
lying
no
through
way
his teeth.
he's not right. There's no way he's not aware from a public standpoint and what's going on with his staff, and from a PR standpoint and everything else. I mean, so again, so yesterday, it all sort of came to a head, and look, it's not trying to be, oh, look at Brett Jensen or look at WBT. It was just in general, because it wasn't just us. He shut out 2 or 3 other media outlets as well.
Who?
And he shut out the Carolina Journal, which is a pretty big, it's a pretty big newsletter. I mean, it's a weekly, it's a legitimate newspaper, a weekly newspaper, and it's very legitimate. It covers all kinds of things from agriculture to politics to legislation. I mean, it's a really big newsletter, and very well established, been around for a long time, and it is right leaning. And then they cut out a very small but extremely good publication called the North State Journal, which is also right-leaning, but they do a lot of good work, but they're really small in compared to the Carolina Journal. And so he shut the 3 of us out. And
your radio station is right-leaning, right? Because y'all
it is, yeah. We carry Rush. Well, our talk show hosts are, yes. The news department is straight down the middle. Right. I mean, we have Democrats and we have Republicans and we have independents in our newsroom. Mm-hmm. They've never asked us, what's your political affiliation? I mean, we're just straight news. Again, it's almost like 2 separate entities. You've got you've got the newsroom, and then you've got the talk show hosts, and we're completely separate from each other. And so yes, our talk show hosts are right-leaning. The newsroom is we try to be down the middle as possible.
Well, I mean, the common denominator is pretty obvious here, right? with the 3 outlets that he's apparently shutting out. And before we go any further, this is not the last thing I want this to be is a political discussion. I think this discussion is about accountability. Holding truth to power. And I think I speak for you as well. If you worked at a radio station that was sort of known for its liberal commentary, and you were covering a conservative governor doing the same thing, I think you would be saying the exact same thing, and I think I would be too, that the issue is accountability, not which way you lean, right?
I could not agree more. And like you said, this has nothing to do with politics. It literally doesn't. It has everything to do with your job and my job and what we're trying to do, and the fact that you hold a public office and therefore you can be held accountable for things. And, and I always say this, 51% of the country despises Donald Trump and 49% of the country voted for him. But at the same point, Donald Trump, every single news conference, took questions from CNN and NBC, his 2 biggest adversaries in his mind. And he would still take questions from them.
Well, he also berated them.
Well, no, he did. But he also but he berated everybody. But he did, minus Fox News, but he did at least take questions from them. And I wasn't even afforded that opportunity. Yeah. And so, hey, Governor Cooper, you want to take my question and then berate me afterwards? Hey, so be it. At least I asked my question. No. And now I've got you on video and tape not answering my question.
Yeah. I mean, he definitely comes off looking taking the loss in that situation, just perception-wise. Regardless, I mean,
it's sort of like, Larry, I remember there were some times when we were covering Clemson back in the day, in the 2000s, and 15 years ago, and something would pop up. Oh, I remember what it was. We were covering the baseball game one time, and it's just common practice. You get players and you get the coach, and Lega didn't want to provide any baseball players for us one time. And I'm like, wait, what? Because they suffered a loss and they were not happy and they were all upset and they wanted to leave. And I remember that being a situation also.
Yeah, but win or lose, show up and do what you're supposed. That's why the players I respected the most over the years are the ones who showed up regardless.
Yep.
Taj, you weren't around for Taj Boyd, but he was that way. Trevor Lawrence, absolutely that way. You know
who? I mean, someone that we as reporters sometimes gave a lot of criticism to, but he showed up every single time we wanted to speak to him was Will Proctor.
Yeah.
We gave him a lot of grief for a lot of bad things.
Too much grief.
But he still showed up every single week. And that's a lot. And I'm sitting there thinking to myself, if a 22 and 23-year-old can do that, you're telling me a governor can't?
A 22 or 23-year-old who's not an elected official.
Exactly. who's not getting paid.
Yeah, who's not really obligated.
Right.
Exactly. It's just in any real substantial way to sit there and get grilled by reporters. Like he's a freaking college athlete.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
Well, so I guess continuing to sort of translate it to the sports realm, like whenever I've had issues with the people I've covered, whether head coach or whatever, the typical routine is, okay, you go through the communications person privately and say, okay, what's going on here? Did I overstep my bounds? Like what does he think I did wrong? Whatever. You hash it out that way. What have those interactions been like between you and the governor's communications staff?
So at one point I reached out and I knew personally his head spokesperson. I knew her personally. Nice girl. Very nice girl. Young. But I knew her personally from her having worked in Charlotte and having been the spokesperson and media person for somebody here locally in Charlotte. And then she got that job. And I went, oh, this is great. I mean, because she and I had a really good relationship. So I had her cell phone and everything like that. So I wasn't getting caught on, and we'd gone, I think it was like 100 straight days I wasn't called on. I texted her and I said, all right, don't worry, what's the problem here? Like, what's going on? Am I missing something? What's going on here? Because obviously I'm not being called on when I was the first person in the conference room, and I'm still not getting called on. Like, so you're obviously not taking them in order. What's going on here? And she said, but I don't know. I'm not in charge of that. I don't know. And she goes, I don't think anything's going on. And I said, Dory, no, it's brutally, painfully obvious something's going on. And she goes, well, we have a lot of callers calling. I said, yes, but when I'm the first one and I'm not getting called on, there's a problem because you can cherry pick who's being able to ask the question. And then she said, but I will find out for you. I'll ask. I'll see what I can find out. And I never heard back. And I would send messages and emails, never heard back. And then finally, I wanted to speak to the health secretary of North Carolina. And I said, assuming I'm still banned for talking to the governor, am I allowed to talk to the health secretary? And she never responded to that either, other than sending the health secretary's PR person's email. And that was it. And so and when other media outlets would contact them, they would literally say the same thing. Yes, a lot of people are trying to call in. A lot of reporters are trying to call in, and it's just, it's tough to get in sometimes. That was their answer. It's just tough to get called on. Well, it's not tough when you're literally the first person in the news or in the queue in the conference call. And it's just painfully and totally obvious that they're lying through their teeth. And, Larry knows this better than a lot of people. I just do not like PR people. That was one of the first things I told my boss. I said, I've dealt with a lot of college SIDs. Some are good, some are clowns, and I just don't have a lot of patience for them. And I said, and I told my bosses that. And then when you get like PR people literally lying to you, to your face, I was like, okay, this is exhibit A on why I do not like or trust PR people.
What have your bosses? What is your sort of advice from your bosses been this whole time? Have they sort of participated or tried to maybe intervene at all, or have they just left it up to you?
They left it up to me because my direct bosses, I had 3 direct bosses. None of them grew up or are from the news industry. Like, it was more talk shows and sales and stuff like that. They weren't they didn't have a news background. They were in charge of the station as a whole and other avenues. So I have 3 direct bosses, and the top boss, the head boss of charge of multiple radio stations in Charlotte, just kept saying, keep after it. Just keep after it. And as a matter of fact, all of them said the same thing. Just keep after it. Keep after it. And they knew that this was going to happen at some point. At some point, when they opened things up, whether it was 2 days ago in terms of press conferences or if it was next month, whenever, when they opened things up for in-person press conferences, that at some point I was going to be there and I was going to ask these questions. It also should be stated that at least 2 of my bosses that I know of, and I don't know about the third, but I know of at least 2 of my bosses lean to the left. Mm-hmm. So this isn't a right or left thing. This is just, wait a minute, we're media and you're ignoring us. And so that's why I want to make sure it's explicitly clear. It's not a right or left thing because, like I said, yes, we are a right talk show host station, but the newsroom is independent, and my bosses, I know of a fact for 2 of my 3 bosses actually lean to the left. So we are, like I said, as a news station, we try to be down the middle as much as we can with our news reports. So yeah, they just left it up to me and what I thought was the best way to handle it. And I let them know, hey, just so you know, Cooper's in town and I will be there tomorrow.
One comparison that comes to mind when you talk about that clearly defined wall between opinion and news at a, I guess a right-leaning whatever news outlet or radio station is, heck, Fox News during the election. One of the controversial things they did was they called Arizona when they felt it was, it was ready to be called, and that was strictly their news division. They were serious about that, about covering the election in a straight up way, in an expert way from a news standpoint. So there was clearly a wall there, and that's one of the reasons they caught so much hell, because it was like, whoa, wait a minute, how in the world is Fox News calling an election? And
they were the first ones to call Arizona, if I'm not mistaken.
I believe so.
And here's how I explain it to people who really don't, maybe don't understand or fully have great knowledge of how media works. Here's exactly, I'll put it in newspaper terms. Yeah, and I know they don't exist anymore, but people know what newspapers used to be.
Some of the listeners do.
So I'll use South Carolina, the state of South Carolina, as a great example. Gene Sapakoff is a great columnist and has been for decades with the Charleston Post and Courier. He writes about opinions because he is a columnist. That's all he does is give opinions. That's like the talk show hosts. They give opinions. But then you used to have Larry Williams, who was the Clemson beat reporter for the Charleston Post and Courier, who only gave news reports. He didn't do opinion pieces because he's supposed to stay unbiased as a reporter. And so that's the difference. You have your reporters and you have your columnists, and one gives opinions and one gives news. And that's what we are.
But it's easy to sit here and say, okay, yeah, in the last decade or decade and a half, okay, Larry Williams is supposed to be straight down the middle. And then you have your columnist, these clearly defined roles between news and opinion. But that arrangement or standard is way farther back in history, in my opinion. Like, I went back in doing research for a couple of the books I wrote back. So it required going and reading a lot of old newspaper articles from the late 70s and 80s. And one thing that really struck me from back then was it really was clearly defined, where the beat writers were just straight news and never ventured into opinion. And it was the columnist who came in and said, okay, this coach needs to be fired or whatever. And I think one of the sort of unintended consequences of today's sort of landscape, with Twitter, and not just Twitter, but predating Twitter. Like, I remember when I was at the Post and Courier, I had a blog. I had an opinion column that I would write I don't know, maybe I think it was maybe on Sundays or something. Actually it was like a Wednesday ACC column, and in that column I would opine, and so now it's like everybody has a platform and an urge, whether it's beat writer or whoever, to give their take, and I think that's dangerous. I think it's really dangerous because it just gets it complicates things for a guy who's supposed to be covering a beat and I'm just as guilty. I write opinions all the time. I'm sort of a I'm sort of a hybrid of the two, I guess, now doing what I do, but I think
and you're exactly right, Larry. And we sound like a bunch of dinosaurs. I get that. The way back in the day with the newspapers, where people actually got the newspaper and had to wait 24 hours for the news to show up on their front doorstep. I get that. But at the same point, at least early on, there was trying to maintain the separation between opinion and news, even, with internet and when team websites and fan sites first started jumping up and message boards, and it sort of started there a little bit. And, and then you had team fan websites, especially early on, that were really bad. A lot of them have changed in a lot of ways. And like Tiger Illustrated, when they hired you, and CU Tigers, when they hired me, they tried to be a little bit more neutral and a little bit more, let's put it this way, more honest about things. And so how they weren't just going to win the championship and pick to win the ACC every single year when you knew they were going to go 5-6 or 5-7. So, but that's really, the whole thing with news media. Put it to you this way. ESPN they have encouraged for a long time now for their anchors, for their talk show hosts, for their reporters to promote. And I'm a Jets fan. Everyone knows Mike Greenberg's a Jets fan. Everyone knows that Michael Wilbon who used to be at the Washington Post, is a Chicago Bulls and Bears fan because he grew up in Chicago. I mean, everyone knows this. So everyone knows who their team is. And Stuart Scott was Carolina. And so everyone knows this now. So now the fandom has it's skewed it. I mean, it really has skewed, and it really, that separation, like you were just saying, almost doesn't even exist anymore. I mean, there's a little bit of separation between personal opinion and the news that you're supposed to be covering, but it is, especially in sports, it has skewed mightily.
Yeah, there's something that I tell people, because the average fan, he's not supposed to be educated or informed about, my business and the inner workings of it. But I mean, countless times over the years, it's like, oh, you covered Clemson. You guys are going to be good this year, and I'm like, no, it's not. It's not you guys.
That's right.
And they're like, wait a minute,
I don't get a W-2 from Clemson. Sorry.
And it's like, wait, what? You don't enjoy this? You don't pull for them? And I'm like, oh, I absolutely enjoy it. Like being around a national championship contender, that's freaking awesome. But am I sitting there in the press box going, oh God, come on, make this game-winning field goal? Heck, there's something that I just couldn't ever picture myself doing that, regardless of what team it is. I think part of that is during a game, you're trying to figure out what you're going to write, Oh yeah,
well, and I will say this. You go into each season, and from a selfish standpoint, as a reporter or a talk show host or whatever, whether you're on a team fan website or you're an independent entity, you want one of two things. And from a selfish reason, you either want them to be 12-0, or you want them to be 0-12. Because either way, it's going to generate a lot of interest and a lot of content and a lot of eyeballs. And if they're 8-4 every year and they're ho-hum and they're going to the Belk Bowl or now the Duke's Mayo Bowl here in Charlotte, nobody cares. They're like, well, he's doing just enough to keep his job, but hey, great, whatever. And nobody cares.
Oh, I've told people. I'm sorry. Go ahead.
No, I was going to say, so that's you want either a perfect season or a god awful season.
I've told people that if had this era not happened under Dabo, had they just continued in perpetual this world between 6-6 and 9-3, I'd be doing something else because that is no fun for it to do for a decade plus. But I'll acknowledge this with Clemson, the way they are right now. I'm playing in the ACC, which they, completely destroy. 99% of the time. It's gotten so routine to see them blow a team out that I must admit that it's a noon game on a Saturday in Death Valley, and there's a good 3:30 game that I want to catch the second half of. I'm like, I'm not saying I pull for them to blow them out, but when they do start to blow the other team out, I'm like, sweet, I can write my whole column before the game ends and be out. At home or in the parking lot.
Now you know how now you know how every single Florida State reporter was in the 90s.
Or how they are now, except it's the other way around. Florida State's getting blown out.
Right, that's exactly right. Yeah, their game is over in the other direction by halftime.
Oh, man. So one other thing about Cooper that comes to mind and thinking about his response, so he noted that you were not at the previous day's press conference. So he obviously is paying some attention. He can't, on one hand, in one breath, say, I don't know what you're talking about. Who are you? And then didn't he say, well, you were free to come to the one yesterday too. So, he was prepped on. Does that make sense?
Oh, no. Yeah, he knew. And his answer was extremely quick. I don't know what you're talking about. I had one yesterday. You were more than welcome to come yesterday.
He knew you weren't there.
Right. And I immediately said, I followed up. Well, that's fine. You had one yesterday, but what about the previous 14 months? and he goes, well, I'm not sure what you're talking about. I said, well, your staff does. And because they were contacted by many media outlets about this. The one thing that I will take away from that whole exchange was that at the very end, when he reiterated that he had a press conference yesterday, and I was free to attend, and I'm free to attend in the future. And that he goes, and I'm here right now. So what's your question? Ask away.
I'm here right now to not answer your question.
And my response was, my immediate response, and I, just a little, self-indulgence for a second. I was like, I thought it was pretty good. Because on the spot, I said, well, my question is, why didn't you answer my question for the last 14 months? And then he stammered, hemmed and hawed, and then goes, I don't know. And then his PR people cut in and goes, okay, I think we're about done. We're about done.
Oh man, what a fat L for him on that. Like just perception wise, man. So did you get any communication from his staff after that? Was there any aftermath? No. Any fallout?
Nope.
Nothing
at all.
What about other media members?
One media outlet came up and spoke to me about it and thought that was a legitimate question and thought I handled it well, and what they did to us was inappropriate. As a matter of fact, it was our rival. I mean, our main competition is Charlotte.
Wow.
The NPR station, and actually came up to me and said, no. And I know the reporter well, and he said he used to be a newspaper person, and he said, hey, he goes, that was a legitimate question. I thought you handled it very, very well by not letting him off the hook and pressing him on it. He goes, and what he did to you guys is inexcusable. And so, and this is coming from our main rival. So, I mean, I thought that was good. I really appreciated that. So, and then I had a county commissioner politician come up to me, Democrat chairman, and said, what was that about? And I explained it to him, and he said, yeah, that's not right. And so it was, so the feedback, I saw somebody in New York, some news post or media outlet in New York wrote about it today. And someone sent it to me and said, hey, they're talking about this in New York.
Wow.
I said, oh, wow, that's because, it wasn't the intention. It was just literally trying to figure out in front of everyone, okay, you shut me out in front of everyone, so now I'm going to ask you in front of everyone. It was sort of like, okay, well, this is the way it goes. I'm not going to ask you privately. I want people to hear this. I want our listeners to hear this, why you did this.
Well, I agree. Thought you handled it well. And, I mean, like you said earlier, I mean, even if you're high school newspaper reporter, you shouldn't go 14 months without getting called on. And I think a high school newspaper reporter would have been called on, and the reasons are obvious why you weren't, which are the reasons are bunk. It's by all available evidence.
I'm sorry. I was going to say, to talk about the high school reporter, one of my all-time favorite stories. Very first time I met Bobby Bowden was in October of 2000. And I was down there all week covering Florida State leading up to Bowden Bowl 2. And it turned out to be, it was like number 1 versus 2 or 2 versus 3, something like that. And that was the game where Clemson lost like 63-9 or whatever it was on national TV. But I was down there all week. And the very first time I met Bobby Bowden, he's after practice sitting in his golf cart taking questions. And there was this girl, very young girl for the Florida State newspaper, who clearly didn't know much about what she was talking about. But yet everyone had left, like all this grizzled, seasoned veterans, reporters had all left. And it was just me and this girl. And she asked questions that were just painfully obvious and not very good questions. But, I mean, we all ask stupid questions when we're young and trying to figure it out. And Bobby sat right there the entire time and literally answered all her questions for like 10, 15 minutes, no matter what the subject or how ridiculous they might have been. And I just remember sitting there, and I gained so much respect for him. And like his PR people just let it go. They didn't try to cut it off. And that was literally the very first time I'd ever met Bobby Bowden. I immediately gained a lot of respect for him because he just sat there and answered all those questions instead of saying, "Oh, I've got to go. He took every single one.
Well, and the late great Bob Bradley, who I never knew. I was too young had not come around by that point. But one of the most memorable sort of tributes to him that you often hear is that it didn't matter whether you were the lead college football writer at the New York Times or Atlanta Journal-Constitution or a first-year reporter at the Tiger student newspaper. He treated everybody the same. And that's the way it should be. I
agree. I absolutely agree. Because look, every single reporter starts out at some podunk paper or podunk job. I mean, at least we did back then. I mean, but and most still do today, where you're maybe writing for a website with only 400 subscriptions as opposed to 4,000 subscriptions or 40,000 subscriptions or whatever. And so, we all start at the low places and we all have to work our way up, and we can't get better and we can't do things if we're treated like outcasts, regardless of the size of the media outlet. And so, whether it's, and I know you've done this because I've seen you literally do this back in the day when we were all working and covering the Clemson beat. I remember when you would talk to like student people or people at smaller outlets, and they would ask you questions and you would talk to them about it and say, well, this is probably the best way to do this, or a good way to handle it is by doing this, or whether you're dealing with interns at Tiger Illustrated. So because we've all been there.
Oh yeah. We've
all been there. We've all been in their shoes being completely clueless.
Absolutely. I was clueless after college when I was getting paid to do it. Oh my gosh. I cringe at some of this.
I got two stories about being completely clueless, and they're both funny. And one of them involves Minute Bowl. And so it was my very ever first NBA game. And I was 22 years old, and I was making $20 a game as a stringer. Okay. It was the Charlotte Hornets. Minute Bowl, 7'6" guy from one of the countries in Africa, and he was an oddity. And so everyone wanted to see him and speak to him after the game. And I got on the very, very front, right beside his locker. He's sitting in his locker with a towel draped over his legs, and he's answering questions in his accent. And everyone's like loving him and everything else. And he was great. And there's, 15, 20 media people surrounding his locker. And I'm in the very, very front. And like I said, I'd never been in a locker room before, like a high school locker room as a reporter or anything like that. So he said, okay, fellas, I appreciate it or whatever. And I'm literally 4 inches from him, 5 inches. And this 7'6" man stands up. Unbeknownst to me, he was completely naked from the waist down. The towel drops. It's 3 inches from my face. Is Minute Bowl.
Wow.
But But I mean, his private parts were right in my face. The 7'6" guy. And I jumped back like, whoa, because I thought I was going to get hit in the nose with it. And I jumped back and I jumped into a cameraman who then proceeded to cuss me out for jumping into his $30,000 camera. And that was the very first time I'd ever been to an NBA game. And from that moment on, I never stood directly in front. I always stood to the side.
If you're in the Eastern Midlands and PD area and you're in any way interested in buying and selling a home, commercial property, land, need to consider reaching out to Uptown Realty. They're based out of Sumter and run by a friend of mine, Patrick Enzer, big Clemson guy, used to cover the Tigers in a newspaper capacity, longtime supporter of Tiger Illustrated, longtime listener to the Dubcast. The home buying process should be an enjoyable experience, so let Patrick and his staff do all the heavy lifting. All you got to do is pick up the phone and call 803-774-0435 or go to uptownrealtysc.com. Want to share a quick word about Founders Federal Credit Union? If you've been to a sporting event in Clemson, you've probably heard about Founders already. They are the official credit union partner of the Clemson Tigers. In addition to that, all Clemson faculty, staff, and students are eligible for membership as well as IPTAY members. Matt Gross is a proud Clemson alum and the vice president for the Clemson market for Founders Federal Credit Union. Matt's office is located beside the Walmart Neighborhood Market on Old Greenville Highway in Clemson. For more information, go to foundersfcu.com. Another loyal supporter of the Dubcast is Blackacre Law Firm in Greenville, a subsidiary of Parham Smith and Archambault. Blackacre helps South Carolina residents achieve their dreams of home ownership by providing experienced professional representation for real estate closings. Attention to detail is crucial in real estate law. Blackacre is committed to making sure nothing gets by them preparing residential or commercial closings. Blackacre also offers estate planning services for their clients in the Greenville area. Find out more about Blackacre at 864-326-3507. I was at the Masters, my first time covering the Masters. I guess it would have been 2000 or something. And I was assigned to write an article about Mike Weir.
Yeah.
After he finished his round. And I was accompanied by my sports editor took me over there from the media tent, Ward Clayton, from the media tent over to the under the tree where all the golfers do their post-round interviews, and my sports editor goes, "Yeah, you know, he's the only left-hander who's won a major or something." Had Weir won a major by that point?
Weir won a major in 2003, and the only reason I know that is he won the Masters in 2003. The only reason I know that was because that was my first year covering the Masters, and he won it.
Right, but he had done something before that, as of 2000.
Yeah, he had won like maybe the TPC or something like that, but not a major.
Anyway, it was my boss just sort of offhandedly said, "Yeah, you know, he's the only left-hander who's done this or something." Mm-hmm. And I'm an idiot, like I just said. And, you know, Weir's got all these Canadian reporters around him, you know, this cluster of like 8 or 10 reporters who are there to cover him.
Yep.
And I'm like, I butt in. I'm like, Mike, did you know you're the only left-hander to have done whatever it is? I can't remember. And he goes, yeah. It's this awkward, just idiotic. Anyway, those are the lessons you learn when you're still learning, I guess.
Well, my favorite, and this is the best thing that ever happened to me as a reporter. I'm not joking. So about 2 games after the Minute Bowl incident, I go up, it was at the beginning of the season, and I go up to Kenny Gaddison, went to Old Dominion, longtime NBA player. He's still working in the NBA. He's either a coach or a scout or front office somewhere. He's from Wilmington. Super, super nice guy. Now think about this now. I'm 22 years old and completely clueless because no one's ever told me what to do because I'm going to these games by myself. So I'm just trying to sort of watch what everyone else is doing. So I decided to go up to Kenny Gaddison, like 3rd game of the season, and say, and I'm going to interview him for like a little preview. And I say, hey, you know, and so I'm talking to him, asking him questions, whatever. Then I said, so what are your goals this year stat-wise? And he looked at me and he goes, what do you mean? And I said, well, you know, stats. Do you want to average like 15 points, 20 points, 8 rebounds, 9 rebounds? Because he was a power forward. And he goes, I don't care about stats. He goes, that's a horrible question. And I said, I'm sorry. And he goes, what's your name? And I told him. And he goes, who you work for? And I told him. He said, what are you doing tomorrow? And I said, this is only my third game, whatever. And he goes, what are you doing tomorrow? I said, nothing. Why? He goes, meet me at the Bojangles at such and such place at 12 o'clock for lunch. And I said, okay. And so I show up at Bojangles. I drive the 40 minutes to the Bojangles that he talked about. And I meet him there, and there's nobody there. And we sit down for lunch at Bojangles, and he gives me a tutorial on good and bad questions.
Wow.
As God is my witness, this happened. And I went, this is the greatest thing ever. And so I literally never asked another question about, well, do you want to throw for 5,000 yards or whatever? So I never did that. That was the last time I asked a player about his personal stats before the season. What do you want to accomplish?
And then even if he did have a list of goals, it's not like anybody in his right mind, but going into a season would say, yep, this is what I want to do, because then you just put more pressure on yourself.
Well, exactly. And then if you do it, then your teammates might think you're selfish, whatever.
Yeah.
So that literally happened. And that was like one of the nicest things to ever happen to me as a young reporter, which goes back to everything that we started talking about. It shouldn't matter if I'm at the biggest media outlet in the state of North Carolina or at the smallest one-day-a-week newspaper outlet that has 2,000 readers. It shouldn't matter. If I'm at a press conference and I'm a legitimate reporter at a real media outlet, you should be able to call on me.
You know, the student reporter topic got me thinking about the incident this past basketball season between Coach K and the student reporter, the Duke Chronicle, I guess it was. Do you remember that? Was that something you
refresh my memory?
So they had lost, Duke had lost at Louisville, I believe it was. And they had like maybe, 5-day break or something like that afterward. And the student reporter comes in on the Zoom press conference and says, Coach, what are your goals? How do you move forward from this? What are your goals for the next, 5 days or whatever? What do you want to get achieved? And Krzyzewski basically said, like, look, I haven't moved on yet. I'm still, I'm still in this game. And he basically, it was a mild lecture into it because he knew he was a student reporter. And naturally, with the way things are now, it turned into a controversy. Clickbait headlines. Krzyzewski tears into student reporter. You had all these people who were just shredding Mike Krzyzewski for how could he be that cruel? This poor kid, he undressed him, in public. And the sad thing to me about that is that, like I said, it was a perfectly civil response and exchange. There was nothing really wrong with the question. There was nothing really wrong with Krzyzewski's response. It might have been a bit lectury, a bit preachy. That's who Krzyzewski,
That's who he is.
That's who he is.
But he does that to 60-year-olds.
Yeah, but the thing is, like, I would guarantee you that through his career at Duke, that he did that same thing, pre-Twitter, pre-social media, a lot. And he's teaching those kids, right? And it ends up helping them. He's sort of taken them under his wing by being a little stern, but certainly not. He never trashed him or anything like that, I've seen what I think my response to it at the time, amid all the uproar over it, the needless uproar, was that, look, I've seen Kay, act like a jackass and lose his mind. That doesn't make the friggin' top 50.
I remember, I have had this like well established into my career. Like, Clemson, Georgia, even up here with the Panthers when I was at foxsports.com with Panthers and Hornets, and literally had John Fox, the head coach of the Panthers at the time, go, that's a really stupid question.
What was the question?
I don't even remember. Oh, I know what it was. So Jake Delhomme he was the quarterback at the time of the Panthers, and he was having just a terrible season. And he had finished the previous season by having 6 turnovers in the playoff game against Arizona. And immediately after that, and they signed him to a big contract, like a $20 million extension or $20 million guaranteed, which was unheard of at the time. And then he started the next season and was just dreadful. Had something like 15 turnovers between fumbles and interceptions in his first 5 games or whatever. And the thing was, hey, are you going to go to the backup? Are you going to go to the backup? And he goes, Jake's our starting quarterback. So then we get to about game 9, 10, or 11. It was like late in the season, and he finally made the switch to the backup quarterback, Matt Moore, who's still with the Dolphins. And the Panthers won like 3 straight games. And my brilliant question was, knowing what you know now, do you wish you'd started Matt Moore a lot earlier?
Oh, boy.
Knowing what you know now, do you wish you would have started Matt Moore a lot earlier? That's a stupid question. So, yeah.
Even while no doubt that is in his mind.
Oh, absolutely.
Damn it! I should have done this earlier.
and I think I said, well, what is that? Is that a yes or is that a no? And he said, then he gave the hindsight's 20/20 answer.
Dude, that is a classic Jensen response right there. Like most reporters, 95% of reporters, after that's a stupid question, would have just meekly looked down at their shoelaces and let the press conference carry on. Jensen's like, is that a yes or no? I love it.
Yeah, I mean, I've had that happen actually quite a few. That seems to be like my go-to with politicians, especially. I mean, Larry, I'm not even joking. That happened to me 2 days ago where I literally had to ask that to somebody. And I said, I don't understand your answer. Is that a yes or is that a no? I don't understand.
Man. It's interesting, like with one of the drawbacks of everything being televised now, meaning press conferences and stuff, is that people just draw their own conclusions and create adverse relationships where there aren't. Yep. Sort of exaggerated, like the mutual friend of ours, David Hale.
Exactly.
Of ESPN.com back in 2015 after the Georgia Tech game. Clemson is an early national championship contender, sort of not out of nowhere, but it's a very fresh storyline, and they finally have reached this elite level. And Hale's question is more, hey, do you feel like you've sort of just totally washed away these old stereotypes and debunked that Clemsoning thing? And Dabo just goes absolutely ballistic on David, and David handles it with typical grace and, I guess, self-deprecation. Well, there are people out there who, to this day, Clemson fans, probably view David Hale as the Antichrist. And they think that Dabo hates him too, because of that. Well, the reality is that they have a good relationship. And that night, Dabo texted him, and they smoothed things over. And it's seeing the sausage made out on YouTube. It's out, the fact that it's out in the open. It really causes people to jump to wrong conclusions. And to really not be aware of the fact that, a reporter and a person he or she covers, it's like any other relationship. There's give and take, and there is conflict. But if it works right, you resolve those differences and you move on. And it's just, I don't know.
Well, I remember I was with David the day after that happened, and he was good with Dabo. But he was a little distraught because of all the myriad of grief that he was taking from Clemson fans from all over the country on Twitter and emailing him and everything else. And he was a little rattled by it. I think most of us would be, because it wasn't just 5 fans. We're talking hordes and hordes of people. And you're right. I mean, people see the seeds put into the ground with reporters and the football coaches or the politicians or whatever, and they see it cultivated. I mean, they see the produce plucked, They see all that, but they don't see everything behind the scenes and how it's nurtured and cared for and things that go on while you're trying to maintain the crop or the relationship with the coach or the politician. They only see the questions. That's all they see. And they only hear the answers. And so, but they don't see or hear everything else. A lot of times they think, oh, well, Brett asked the question and that's the last time they spoke. Well, no, 9 times out of 10, when I turn the microphone off, I'm still talking to them about something else, either about their answer or making sure we're okay, or if there's any issues that they want to talk about, whatever. And so yeah, I mean, that's the thing that a lot of the fans, be it political fans or sports fans, don't understand.
Yeah, any good reporter carries the relationship way beyond the formal press conference questions and answers. And so you can have a coach who says, maybe Dabo says to me, I don't like that question, and that's in a press conference setting. And then naturally people go crazy. Ooh, Dabo pissed at, Dabo goes off on Clemson reporter, and it becomes a sensation where the reality could be after the press conference, the communications guy gets us together and we hash it out, and after 5 minutes, we're totally fine. I
will say this: my time covering Clemson, with someone that you and I both know and respect very well and like personally, Tim Beret. My time covering Clemson, with Tommy Bowden was the head coach, and Tim, the SID in charge of football. It's the greatest access I've ever had, be it sports, non-sports, whatever. Do you remember, and I'm sure you do, obviously, but when we could just literally walk into the football offices unannounced, walk down a hallway, see the assistant coach, wide receiver coach, Dabo Swinney in his office, and we just pop in and go, hey, you got a minute? And he goes, yeah, sit down. Or, hey, I'm a little busy. Can you come back in an hour? It was, and then they finally had to outlaw that because someone was like doing things they shouldn't have been doing, a reporter that you and I both know, and like eavesdropping and snooping around. And, but that was like the greatest thing. And fans had no idea that we were given this great access and could just talk to these coaches, and that we had relationships with all the coaches, whether it was Chris Rumpf or Brad Scott or Vic Koenig. It didn't matter. We had great relationships with them. Yeah.
If this were, that kind of access is what makes the current coaches today wake up in the middle of the night in cold sweats. Oh my God. I just had the worst nightmare.
Right. And I'm not throwing Clemson under the bus now, because nobody in the country does that anymore.
No, and Clemson's access relative to everyone else is pretty good. Not great, pretty good. But I will say that had the parameters and restrictions that are commonplace today been in place in 2008, October 2008, when Tommy Bowden is out and Dabo Swinney is in, I, and probably you and others as well, who had been covering Clemson I had been covering for about 5 years at that point. I would have been introducing myself to Dabo in October of 2008, saying, hey, my name's Larry Williams. I'm with the Post and Courier of Charleston, instead of, hey, congrats, Dabo. Happy for you. Like, we had a relationship that was built from the moment, the first few weeks that I was here in January of 2004. I had gone and plopped down in his office and met him and had developed a relationship with him. Whereas that you can't do that now.
Yeah, when they won the ACC championship, but they had lost in the national championship, and I saw him the following year at ACC Media Days here in Charlotte, and it's the first time I'd seen Dabo honestly in person since 2008, because I was in Athens and then back here in Charlotte for a long time since 2009. Been in Charlotte, so I literally had not seen Dabo. Well, I take that back. I had not seen Dabo since 2010, maybe it was, whenever they lost. It was right after Dabo's first year, and he fired Billy Napier and a couple other people after they lost to Skip Holtz in South Florida. Did
you ask questions? And you were here. You were at that press conference, right?
Yeah, I asked the one question, and Dabo, to his credit, gave a great answer to my one question that I expected a non-answer answer.
Are you making changes? Is that what you
Yeah,
asked?
I asked him, I said, so, because, the offense was so bad and everything else. And I said, do you expect staff changes coming up during the offseason? He goes, absolutely. I was like, whoa. I didn't see that coming. I'm like, really? Oh, okay, great. And then, of course, Billy Napier was let go, and that's when they brought in a new offensive coordinator to have, to be control of everything. And Dabo gave up the play calling. But yeah, it was. But so I saw Dabo at the hotel the night before the media day started, with dinner and everything else. And I saw him outside in the parking lot, and we probably talked for 15, 20 minutes. And I had not seen this man, God, so like I said, since 2010, whatever year it was. And we talked because we had developed that relationship at Clemson, and it wasn't always great. I mean, didn't always write great things, but he understood and we respected each other, and we generally got along like he does with a lot of the media. And I told him, I said, Dabo, congratulations. I'm very happy for you personally. Congratulations, and I said, you proved a lot of people wrong. Congratulations. And he appreciated that. And but like I said, I hadn't seen the man in several years, and it was like we picked up right where we left off. So, because we were cordial. And like I said, yes, there are going to be times when he gets mad at you or got mad at me or David Hale or anybody else. And that's just the way it is as a reporter. Every once in a while, you're going to piss people off. But these are questions that you need to ask. And just because you have to ask hard questions doesn't mean that you should be shut out from asking the questions.
And on the other hand, sort of shoe on the other foot, I'm covering all the appendages, the bodily appendages here. But as a reporter, if you criticize people, if you scrutinize people in print or whatever for a living or over the airwaves, then you can't get butthurt when the person you cover calls you and says, hey, man, I didn't appreciate, I thought you went overboard with this article. Mm-hmm. I can't say, how dare you question. I have to be, I can disagree. I can say I respectfully disagree, but I still have to be, I have to be receptive to that, to say, okay, I respect your opinion.
I truly believe with all my heart and soul, I truly believe this. And I'm not saying this in a hyperbolic way. I truly believe this. There is no more sensitive group in the entire country than media.
Yeah.
How dare you question us? And it doesn't matter if it's sports or if it's CNN or Fox News or ESPN or Fox Sports. It doesn't matter. How dare you question us? We're the media. We're the fourth estate. We're the watchdog of America. How dare you question us in our intent? And you're 100% right. Like, if I went out and trashed a politician in 5 straight articles, should I be surprised that politician doesn't want to talk to me anymore? Of course not. I would totally get it. I wouldn't talk to somebody either. You trashed me 5 straight times. I'd take a break from talking to you. So yeah, the media, you can't get butthurt. But again, if that's assuming that you're doing opinion pieces, but if you're just doing straight news and they don't like what you wrote because you exposed something, well, that's not your fault.
Right.
But yeah, there's a lot of aspects to it. It's not just a clear cut black and white. You should always talk to me. You should never talk to me, whatever. It's like there's a lot of things that go on behind the scenes where you have to cultivate relationships. Even if they're bad relationships, you still have to constantly work on them.
There was an episode, it was probably 4 or 5 years ago here, where the proliferation of just ham and egg fanboy outlets that were being credentialed was becoming over the top, and it was affecting how the professionals did our jobs. There was one creepy guy who got arrested for sexual assault, during this time. And when he was obviously creepy going in and had no reason to be credentialed. But anyway, we sort of collectively shared our misgivings with the higher ups at Clemson, and we're told, and this is after Tim Bray was gone, but we basically said, it might be helpful if you guys policed yourselves, as in if you see somebody doing something stupid or unprofessional, call them out publicly. And while I don't think that's a terrible idea, while it's up to the school to develop and enforce their own standards. But one of the big problems, like you you mentioned is the media, and I'm speaking mainly in terms of sports media.
Mm-hmm.
We scrutinize people for a living, but we can't scrutinize other media in part because we're friends with a lot of them. And we don't want to ruffle feathers that way. And in part because it just seems like it's kind of taboo, which that sucks. Like, that's a problem.
Well, and you're 100% right. And that's one of the aspects that I've actually done. I've done that for a long time where I've pissed a lot of media people off because I will call media people out because I think they should be held accountable. And I've done it news-wise. The last 2.5 years, whether it's on Twitter or whether it's on air, single-handedly calling people out. A lot of times I won't mention their names, but I'll mention their outlets. You know, even if I know the reporter's name, I'll say, well, a reporter with NBC local or a reporter with ABC local, whatever. But I won't generally call them out by name, but I will tell what happened or say what happened. And I used to do that when I had my sports show here in Charlotte for 3 years. I would do the same thing. It's like, what in the world are they doing? Like, why would they say this, or why would they do that, or somebody did this, or because I think that we need to be held accountable. We don't get a carte blanche. We don't get just free passes. And so, I mean, but you're 100% right. So many people don't want to do that because we're all friends, and it's like, hey, we've got this little club, this fraternity, and we need to take care of our own.
Pretty brutal. All right, Brett.
It really is sometimes. But hey, this is the life you and I chose. And, you know, I feel like Michael Corleone. Every time I try to get out, they pull me back in.
Well, you have been a master of adapting and reinvention. Like, I admire that because I don't think I'd be able to do that. Like, I can't picture myself doing anything else. And so you've been able to carve out a really cool career beyond the sports media world. And it sounds, as of the most recent example, sounds really exciting.
Yeah, well, I'll never forget telling you this, because you and I, back in the day, and a lot of the other writers, we would make fun of all the TV and radio people because they would ask silly questions and they would only have to work for like 3 minutes and they were done. And we'd always mock them, like, because we're the real reporters, we're the real writers. And I remember I got the radio jobs up here in Charlotte. And I said, remember how we always used to make fun of people, how they really didn't work in the other media outlets? And you said, yeah. And I said, yeah, it's all true. It's all true.
I do have respect for the TV guy who, like, you know, from Columbia or Charleston, who comes up by himself to a football game and has, I mean, that is work. They gotta do all that walk, filming and such, and then they gotta do the press conferences and then do the editing and all that, stand up.
No, yes.
But I will say that, and Reggie Anderson from Columbia, I'm not talking behind his back. I just think it's funny. I think he would laugh too. His whole shtick in press conferences is basically like, I mean, he's like, okay, just give me something on this. It's like a Trevor Lawrence pass for 600 yards, 7 touchdowns. Give me something on that. Just talk about that.
I'm a big Reggie guy. Reggie and I always got along. I'm a big Reggie fan. I like him a lot. He was always a good guy because he never took himself too seriously.
Yeah, Brett Jensen. Hopefully, the next time we talk, you will have had another question answered from the governor and his crack staff that he has under him.
Hey, I'm looking forward to it, and I'll see you again in another 14 months.
Sounds good. Take care, bud. All right, thanks to Brett Jensen. Entertaining as always. Appreciate him taking the time to join us. Also appreciate our 6 very loyal sponsors for helping making the podcast happen. Most of all, thanks to all of you for hitting that play button. Everybody have a great weekend. We'll be back next week. Cheers.